Ezra Lametti here from Rebel News. I am coming to you with a breaking news live stream update. You may have heard over the weekend that Rebel News and myself sued David Lametti, the disgraced justice minister who invoked the martial law, the Emergencies Act. We sued him because he was deleting and destroying government records, namely his Twitter account. We filed that lawsuit. Normally you don't file a lawsuit on a weekend. I've never in fact heard of that before, but our lawyer, our legal team, Chad Williamson, is one of our most keen lawyers, and I would say our winningest lawyer. He's the guy who won various lawsuits against cabinet ministers like Stephen Guilbeault. He also got us accreditation in the 2021 election debates. But let's talk about what he did this weekend. He filed a lawsuit for me personally and Rebel News as a company against David Lametti and the government of Canada, and Lametti in his personal capacity as well as his government capacity, because David Lametti had a Twitter account with that gray government checkmark. And if you know Twitter, you know that gray government checkmark means that it's an official government account. It's not a personal account. It's not a private account. It's not for friends and family. It's not done using personal resources or party resources. It is a civil service project. And after the federal court ruled last week that the Emergencies Act was illegal, unreasonable, unjustifiable, unintelligible, and unconstitutional, those are all words from the ruling, Lametti quit. He quit Parliament, and he announced he was going to work for some fancy law firm called Fasken Martineau. Remind me never to deal with a law firm like Fasken Martineau that hires a disgraced, discredited, civil liberties torching justice minister. I mean, why you would hire a loser like that is beyond me. But on his way out the door, he was destroying documents. That's what it means when you delete your Twitter account. You're destroying your records, not just your public-facing records, but any private direct messages, any DMs as they're called. And the reason that's important is because we know for a fact that these cabinet ministers use private communications like that. We saw it during the judicial inquiry into the Truckers Commission. So not only was David Lametti deleting his public record, which is outrageous to begin with, but he was deleting, that sneaky little bastard was deleting his private message to other MPs, other cabinet ministers, and whoever else he was talking to on Twitter. And he thought he would just casually do this as he left the building. Just delete it. But that's the thing. It's not his Twitter account to delete. That would be if the disgraced Catherine McKenna, former environment minister, who, billions of dollars missing from her department. It's enough that she quit in disgrace, but imagine if she deleted all the files, had all the hard drives wiped, and all the papers shredded for her mismanagement. I mean, by the way, there's still no justice to come there, but as far as we know, she didn't call the shredders. In 2024, you delete documents by pushing a button. Maybe 20 years ago, you would have shredding trucks parked outside the office working all night. It's not how it goes in 2024. But what's incredible is how few mainstream media journalists pointed out his deletion of his Twitter account, and I think it was almost zero who cared about it. Well, we cared about it at Rebel News, and we took him to court. And I want you to look at that lawsuit. It was a pretty good lawsuit filed by Chad Williamson and his team. You can find the whole thing at stopthecoverup.com. That's the special website we set up. Don't you think that's a good name for it? Because that's what it was. I mean, if David Lametti wants to delete his family Facebook page, that's his business. If he wants to delete his private social media accounts, I don't care. I have no interest in them. But I have a huge interest in his public accounts because he's a public person who's involved in a public controversy. And literally this morning, I received a phone call from a law firm in Vancouver that is working with people who were damaged by martial law, who are planning to sue the government. So in a very real sense, what David Lametti was trying to delete was evidence. It was absolutely evidence that would be crucial in the upcoming lawsuit. And he thought he would delete it. But remember who David Lametti is. How did such a man become justice minister? Do you remember the story there? Canada had a justice minister named Jody Wilson-Raybould, who was the first Indigenous justice minister in Canadian history. Certainly Trudeau made a lot of fanfare about that, as did the media. But the thing about Jody Wilson-Raybould is I think she actually cared about the law. Now, she was a bit of a left-wing ideologue, let's be honest. But I think she had a lot of integrity, and it is sort of exciting that an Indigenous person became Justice Minister. I'll say it. I mean, maybe that's affirmative action on my part, but I mean, that is a step towards harmony, I think, you know. But the trouble is she was too ethical. And when Justin Trudeau's friends at a corrupt Montreal-based engineering firm called SNC Lavalin, when they were caught bribing their way into, I think it was a hospital, they bribed public officials to get a contract. So they were being prosecuted for corruption. And they weren't disputing that, by the way. Justin Trudeau and his staff, including Gerald Butts, kept pestering Jody Wilson-Raybould to drop the trial, to call off the trial, to call off a criminal trial. And Jody Wilson-Raybould would not do it. In fact, she was sort of shocked that Trudeau was demanding that she do it. And so he fired her. Justin Trudeau fired Jody Wilson-Raybould because she was too honest. Have you ever heard of that before? So who would he replace to succeed her? Obviously, it's not going to work if you fire her and replace her with someone else who's ethical and puts the rule of law and independence of the judiciary above partisan politics. Obviously, firing Jody Wilson-Raybould and getting a second Jody Wilson-Raybould is not going to help you with your goal of letting your crooked, corrupt, bribe-paying Montreal cronies off the hook. It's not going to work. So the chief qualification for being the successor to Jody Wilson-Raybould is someone who will obey Justin Trudeau no matter what. And that man was named David Lametti. And wouldn't you know it, the chief defining characteristic about him is that he will put his obedience to Justin Trudeau about his public duties. That actually became crucially important 2 years ago when Justin Trudeau proposed to invoke martial law, the Emergencies Act, an act that had never been used before, not even during 9/11. Now, a plain reading of the Emergencies Act, you don't even have to be a lawyer to get this, is that you can only invoke martial law if there is a serious violence in the country, a real insurrection, a revolution, an invasion, something of an existential threat. It has to be an extraordinarily dangerous situation. And step 2 in the decision, you have to invoke martial law only if no existing laws can handle the situation. So if there was, God forbid, an invasion of Canada, if our Canadian forces could repel it normally, you don't need to put the country under martial law. In fact, it's illegal to do so. So the Emergencies Act, which was drafted, I don't know, about almost 40 years ago, as a successor to the War Measures Act, it had some checks and balances within it. You can only use the Emergencies Act if the country is in a grave situation tantamount to a revolution or an invasion. And you can only do it even then if your regular laws don't work. Well, obviously, regular laws work just fine on the truckers. They were honking too much. Our court ordered them to stop. They stopped. Honking problem solved. There were some tickets for parking. Okay, they paid their tickets. And that was about it. There was no serious violence. There was no violence at all, in fact. And so David Lametti knew, because he's a smart lawyer, that invoking the Emergencies Act was, as Justice Mosley of the federal court announced last week, illegal, unintelligible, unreasonable, unjustified, and unconstitutional. David Lametti and every other lawyer involved knew it was illegal and unconstitutional, but David Lametti did it anyways because he was hired specifically for his moral failure. The fact that he was corrupt and corruptible was precisely why Trudeau chose him to be the Justice Minister. Jody Wilson-Raybould would never have approved this. David Lametti would have approved anything. And so when the federal court ruled, as I mentioned last week, David Lametti resigned and disgraced and slunked and sneaked out of Ottawa, going to his luxury reward at Fasken Martineau, the law firm. But even on his way out the door, he was an unethical, corrupt liberal, wasn't he? deleting his own. Look at that bow tie. I know a few people with bow ties, but just the fact that that little weasel is wearing a bow tie is his way of saying, I'm untouchable. I'm different than you. I'm above you. The rules of ethics don't apply to me. I shouldn't knock bow ties. I have some good friends who wear them. But to see that little prat in there as he sells out, the job of the justice minister, you can tell it from the word justice minister, is to administer justice. The job of the justice minister is to ensure justice is done, to protect the civil liberties of Canadians, including to protect them from the government itself. But that little weasel did the opposite. He sold out justice. He sold out the citizens to his boss. And what a disgrace. David Lametti is an unremarkable man. The fact that he looks like a weasel is secondary, and I'm sorry, I shouldn't have mentioned that weaselly weasel, because that's not the main point. Yes, he's a weasel. But the main point is he sold out his fellow Canadians, and that is all he will ever be known for. His epitaph will be, "Here lies the weasel that sold out his fellow man." It takes remarkable courage, like Jody Wilson, able to stand up to a bully. David Lametti was the bully's assistant. But here's my point. We went to court on Saturday. Have you ever heard of such a thing? We rushed to court. We made an emergency application. In fact, I'm recording this live stream at 2 p.m. Eastern time. We're running live at 2 p.m. Eastern. In just under 2 hours, we will have a case management meeting with the federal court, because when you file an emergency lawsuit on Saturday, the court sort of wakes up on Monday and says, oh, we better get going. Let's get our timing straight. So at 4 p.m. today, a case management judge will set out, okay, the plaintiffs will have their paperwork in on this day, and the government will have 2 days to respond, and et cetera, et cetera. You might say, well, what's the point of that now, Ezra? That David Lametti has, show it please, Efron, has restored his account. It was gone on Friday. It was gone on Saturday. We sued on Saturday. We served all the bad guys copies of the lawsuits on Sunday. And would you look at this on Monday? David Lametti's Twitter account is back. We sued on Saturday. He put it back up on Monday. I don't think I've ever seen such a quick surrender in my life, except when you're dealing with a little weasel. It's not enough for him to do something like that, because what if he deletes it again tomorrow? Or what if not he, but one of Trudeau's henchmen deletes it tomorrow? Or what if they have a whoopsies accident and delete it tomorrow? Or what if they're just quietly deleting selected tweets? There are so many things that a weaselly weasel might do to be weaselly. And so that is why we have to pursue and proceed with this lawsuit. We need a court order requiring and compelling Lametti and anyone else not to touch those records, not to delete anything, to preserve those records forever, theoretically, as long as there is litigation afoot, as long as there is a dearth of accountability for the abuses of the Emergencies Act. Imagine that little weasel who thinks he will sneak out the back door, deleting all his files as he go. And the thing is, he almost got away with it. Do you think the Toronto Star or the CBC or the Globe and Mail held him to account? They did not. Only Little Rebel News and our crowdfunded lawsuit did. Yesterday, I was swearing and signing affidavits in this matter. I think our total filings, including exhibits and documents, are 1,000 pages. It'll be interesting to see what the government says at 4 p.m. today. I'm going to go and check right now to see if we have any live stream tweets. If you have any, super chats or Rumble rants, I think they're called, on Rumble. We have none so far, but if you've got something to say, I'll be on the live stream for another 10 minutes or so. I'm just looking out right now. I'm looking through my notes here. It's very exciting. It's very exciting what's happening. I want to touch on one more thing. Efron, that document you showed me. Remember during the fake judicial inquiry into the Emergencies Act, I call it fake because Trudeau handpicked the judge, Trudeau wrote the terms of reference, Trudeau gave an artificial timeline to the judge, and ta-da, surprise, the judge said, oh yeah, your invocation of the Emergencies Act was fine. Total stitch-up. But in the real trial, it was an independent judge that Trudeau did not choose, with real rules of evidence, real rules of law, and Trudeau violated the Constitution. But during that fake commission of inquiry, this document was presented as evidence. Now, I don't quite understand the two different colors there, and some people have said this was a doctored document, but whatever its provenance, this was shown by the Trucker Commission of Inquiry. This is a text message exchange between Marco Mendicino, the disgraced former public safety minister, and David Lametti, the disgraced former justice minister. So, Lametti writes to Mendicino, you need to get the police to move, and the Canadian Armed Forces if necessary. Let's just stop right there. So politicians order cops to arrest protesters? Is that how it works? That's how it works in Trudeau's Canada under David Lametti. And the Canadian Armed Forces, really? You're going to roll in some fighter jets? Well, I don't think we have any to fly. Too many people are being seriously adversely impacted by what is an occupation. I am getting out as soon as I can. What, you're running away from Ottawa? You little weaselly coward. Then he says, people are looking to us, you, for leadership, and not stupid people. People like Carney, Kath, my team. Mark Carney, what role did he have to play? He's not part of the government. I don't know who Kath is. Catherine McKenna? Who cares what she says? So Mendicino writes back and says, how many tanks are you asking for? I just want to ask Anita Anand, the defense minister, how many we've got on hand. And Lametti writes back, I reckon one will do. Now, I've heard it said that this is just a joke. Really? Just a joke, eh? We know for a fact they did deploy the military. They deployed military drones to spy on peaceful protesters. We know this because that's the evidence that many of these prosecutions of these peaceful protesters has relied on. Disclosure from the Canadian Armed Forces. We know this. We know that they jailed people. We know they stomped ride horses on them. We know they seized bank accounts. Why would you suddenly think, this one they're kidding? David Lametti is the lowest of the low. You know that. I know that. Justin Trudeau knows that. That's why he hired him. We went from perhaps the most ethical justice minister in our history, Jody Whistler-Raybould, to the least ethical justice minister, David Lametti. And on his way out the door, he thought he would delete the files. But we sued him on Saturday, and on Monday, he stopped. The reason I showed you that exchange with Marco Mendicino about the Canadian Armed Forces was not just to show what a depraved man he is, but to show the kind of chit-chat on text messages, on private communications that these cabinet ministers have with each other. One of the ways people on Twitter talk to each other is through direct messages. You don't actually need to call someone up or email them and say, what's your email? What's your phone number? How do I connect with you? One of the fun things on Twitter is if someone follows you, you can send them a direct message. I have many politicians follow me, for example, so I can just send them a direct message. I don't have to text them or phone them. It's actually a super convenient way of talking to someone. And unlike my phone list, which might have 1,000 names in it, well, there's about 400,000 people who follow me on Twitter. So obviously that's like the largest possible phone book I could possibly have. And I just have to click direct message and I'm chatting with them. And I think people check their direct messages a lot more often than their email because they get so many fewer of them. I think most people get only a handful of direct messages a day as opposed to maybe 100 emails. My point is, I bet you that David Lametti had a ton of direct messages where he spoke candidly and off without his guard up about what to do with those protesters. We saw in that one text message that he was joking. I didn't see the humor about deploying tanks. What else did this little weasel say when he thought no one else was looking? He managed to get through the public inquiry without being prosecuted or jailed. He managed to get through Justice Mosley's ruling last week without being prosecuted or jailed. And he thought all he had to do was delete his Twitter account and he'd be scot-free. Well, Rebel News is on the file. And we're not done yet. The reason I tell you all this is because we are not giving up. I mean, you might say, Ezra, victory accomplished. Do a victory lap. You got that little weasel to put his Twitter account back up. No. You have to understand how these guys think. You got to think like they think. We don't know what he's deleting. We don't know if he's cherry picking embarrassing things. We don't know if he's gone back and deleted select things. We need a court order barring him from doing that. Drum 12 chipped in $1. I'm in Georgia, USA, and I'm always impressed with Rebel News. Became aware during the trucker convoy in Viva Fry. You have our work cut out for you. Yeah, that's true. All right. Well, you know what? I just wanted to make this announcement. There's not too much more to tell you at this stage. At 4 p.m. Eastern, I will be attending the case conference where a case management judge will outline what happens now. I'm excited that it seems like Lametti is surrendering at the first whiff of gunpowder, but these are tricksters, and I wouldn't count on the fact that they're surrendering. I think they're still planning nasty things. Let me close by saying no one else did this lawsuit. Not the official opposition, not Conservative Party as a party, not other activist groups. Maybe charities couldn't even do it. I mean, I'm friends with the Justice Center for Constitutional Freedoms. I'm friends with the Democracy Fund, of course, and maybe their legal mandates under the Revenue Canada wouldn't allow them to do this. Rebel News did this, and I think that's something that I'm proud of and something that you, as our viewers and supporters and donors, can be proud of. I haven't got the legal bill yet for the lawsuit. I know that 3 lawyers worked around the clock all weekend getting this lawsuit in, and it's not going to be a gentle bill when I receive it. And like I say, we're not done yet. We're just beginning. If you want to help us out, go to stopthecoverup.com, because that's exactly what Lametti was doing. Go to stopthecoverup.com, and I'll give you an update tomorrow after the case management hearing. All right, well, thank you for joining me for this emergency broadcast. On behalf of all of us here at Rebel World Headquarters, to you at home, goodbye, and keep fighting for freedom.